and the whole story terrified me. I just thought, of all the stories, why have I not heard about this story? About and the idea too of it being named something that is unfamiliar. The Nantinak is what it's called. The Nantinak. I've never heard of the Nantinak. So Jeff, here you are. Thank you for coming. Tell us about this story. This is an amazing story.
Yeah. Pardon my silence. There's so much that I'd like to share. It's hard telling where to begin. I agree with you. When you at the start of the show, when you were talking about the Bible and Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, it is so interesting. Anthropologists and psychologists talk about mythology. Do people create the myth because their society needs it? Or do these things actually exist and they are so important that people remember it? And in the case of Nantinak and the town of Portlock, it seems pretty certain to me that the people remember and believe in this because it actually happened and is real, and they did not invent it. The premise for the show, Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, is it's not just based, it is an attempt of a group of Native Americans from Alaska on the Kenai Peninsula. Their current village site, their population is growing to the point where they need more land, and they happen to own the land of the site of the town of Portlock, which their ancestors, their forebears, deserted about the year 1950. And so and they deserted it because of fear of Nantinak. Some people call it a Bigfoot on steroids. And so they wanted to go reinvestigate to see if Nantinak is gone and if it's possible to reoccupy the site, or if it's still there. What do we do? How do we formulate a strategy to move back? And that's the premise for the show. And I don't want to spoil too much. It is on Discovery Plus. People can watch the episodes, but I was proud to be a part of it as the historian anthropologist who dug up some of the historic information on the town. And I kind of pause at this point.
Well, doesn't Nantinak, though, I know a lot of people try to equate supernatural activity to Bigfoot and Sasquatch itself. I mean, of course we have, and you know about the Skookum, kind of has the same personality as Nantinak. But Nantinak, from what I was reading, there are several other things involved here that before they even called it anything resembling a Bigfoot, they were talking about perhaps a large wooded or a large wood demon, they called it. And then there were several other little wood demons that would follow it. There were smaller ones, and there was a larger one. Yep. And there was also some sort of a woman that with white face, who wore a long dress, and she had to drag it behind her. And so there was the white-faced woman screaming, sort of like a banshee, I guess, if you know, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the smaller woodland demons, and then this large, big, hairy, monstrous, cannibalistic type of creature.
Yes to all of that. That is all part of the Portlock tradition. And working in the Pacific Northwest as I have, doing anthropology and archaeology, to the natives here in their oral traditions that were then recorded by themselves or by anthropologists, there are all kinds of different creatures of the forest. These days, because of shows like Harry and the Hendersons and let's face it, cute little cuddly Ewoks in the Star Wars, audiences have this idea that all the big feets were all peaceful vegetarians that just wanted to be left alone. That is absolutely not true, at least here in our region. I'm going to dip into what I know of some Native American traditions, and depending on the tribal area, some of them may not. This may not be part of their tradition, but I think it pretty much generally covers a lot of the tribes of the Northwest.
Right.
In that there's a belief that the Earth has undergone various ages and transformations, and gods and goddesses in various forms used to walk the Earth. And then there's this cataclysmic change, and in some cases, these gods and goddesses lose their power. They're even turned into stone or other objects. And in some cases, their power is reduced. Skookum actually means, in Chinookan, it means strong or big, large. And so in applying it to something supernatural, it's a very strong, powerful entity, which would include what we think of traditionally as Bigfoot, but other creatures as well.
Well, we're seeing the evolution in pop culture as well. I don't know if you're familiar with, well, you were talking about Star Wars characters, talking about Ewoks, but of course, we all know that Chewbacca is supposed to be a representation of a Sasquatch or a Wookiee. But now there's a new character that's in the TV series Book of Boba Fett. It's called the Black Chrysanthemum, and it is a tall, very tough-looking and mean-looking Wookiee that's got black hair, and it looks more like what we'd call the predatory Bigfoot character. And it looks, I mean, you wouldn't want to mess with it. It's just a very terrifying-looking creature. And I'm thinking that, like you were saying, we're talking about the benevolent and fuzzy Harry and the Hendersons type, or the Chewbacca Ewok type or Wookiee type. But now everything's evolving, and we're hearing more stories about attacks happening and people being killed by Bigfoot.
Yes, yeah, and by various means, and this does tie into what happened to this expedition. According to some traditions, the Bigfoot, or the Sikiak, I think is pronunciation of one critter. Yeah. They were short, they were smaller, they were still furry, but they carried sticks, and they would go through the woods with their stick, hitting trees and knocking the trees down. Yeah. In some cases, killing people with the trees they knocked down, and things like that tended to happen. Right. In Portlock.
Well, we gotta take a break, Jeff. I'm hanging on every word with you because this is an amazing story. Natanek. If you've never heard of Natanek, you're going to get educated on that tonight, and a number of other names that are used for the tall, hairy, upright walking creature that terrorizes both Native Americans and campers in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. This is a whole new way of looking at the Bigfoot story.
Natanek is like Bigfoot, but with supernatural powers.
I think what he is a demon of the forest. Portlock was cursed, and Bigfoot's place, and nobody goes there.
Residents say they've heard unusual animal sounds at night, and several ATV riders say they've seen unusual-looking creatures in the distance.
And whatever you do, stay away from the woods, stay away from the forest. That's Nuntinuk's land, no man's land. Do not go in there.
You know, from the stories that I've heard, people they would enter the woods to harvest and hunt. They would just never come back.
We get a lot of feedback from the ATV riders, and one of those recent feedbacks over the last 30 days has been, hey, there's something strange. There's some knocking going on. We hear some screeches. They're not dogs. They're not coyotes. What could it be, right?
Back in 1949, it was a pretty large community.
It was a booming town. They were processing fish. They had canneries. They had a sawmill.
It had a school and a post office.
It probably would have been a city, you know, if it would have kept thriving.
But then people started to disappear.
Just gone. And then bodies started turning up.
People were washing up on the shore, literally shredded.
Went from 100 to a 0 overnight. Everybody left.
Over a span of 2 years,
over 30 people were found dead or missing. The elders evacuated the town.
The elders need you to know about the dangers that you face. We think Nadinuk still lives there. I'm giving you 40 days down there. And at the end of 40 days, you need to come back here. And whatever you do, stay away from the woods, stay away from the forest. That's not Dinuk's land, no man's land.
I'm Clyde Lewis. You are listening to Ground Zero. Natinuk, another name for a big hairy creature that kills. Of course, there are many reports of an area called Portlock, Alaska. Prospectors and hunters going missing frequently, to the point that it became commonplace to hear about them missing. Their bodies were allegedly found in a creek as if their limbs had been ripped apart. School teacher in the 1970s even talked about growing up in Portlock, and also told stories of people being afraid of what could be lurking in the night. These stories point to a large hairy beast, sometimes even talking about small hairy devils that travel in packs, a wailing spirit that wandered in the wilderness, and many deaths that were hard to explain. And of course, if you watch Discovery Plus's new Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, you'll see that it's an amazing story. Jeff Davis is with us tonight on Ground Zero. Of course, he had a part in that documentary, that film. Again, another one of those amazing stories. Something else that, you were talking about how legends sometimes can change over time and adapt over time. One of the things that, now that I'm talking about this, I'm realizing there was a book that was released, I think it was last year, by Max Brooks, who wrote World War Z. He wrote another book called Devolution, or De-Evolution. And in it is about something called the Sasquatch Massacre, where a Sasquatch basically wipes out a small area of Washington called, I think, Green Loop, calls it Green Loop, Washington, basically goes in and wipes out the entire village. But see, the same thing happened at Portlock. I mean, tell us the story of why Portlock became a ghost town.
Yeah, absolutely. Portlock, as far as European European explorers, in 1779, a Spanish ship captain explorer named Bazan landed where Portlock is now, and he performed a possession ceremony, which included raising some kind of a monument, and actually, had there been local native people there, gathering them and reading a proclamation informing them that they were now subjects of the Spanish crown, whether they wanted to be or not. And it was shortly after that illness hit his crew, and I think it was as many as 10 of his sailors died, and the ship's population not that great. And in the logs, they blame it on scurvy, which is almost contrary to my intuition, because they've come ashore. They can start gathering, granted, they're fresh vegetables, but they can start gathering plants that they knew would provide vitamin C, and yet they still died in a matter of days. So he actually ordered his ship away, and then they headed back down south towards California. And he never came back on that expedition. The same site was visited in 1785 by Nathaniel Portlock, who was, even though he was an American colonial, he was a ship's captain in the British Navy. And he also performed possession ceremony, but he didn't find anybody there. He found that the village, there were some buildings and structures, native buildings and structures, but it had abandoned. And he noted that there were several other islands and pieces of land that had also been abandoned. And there's no explanation for that. And the Russian fur traders moved in, but the site, that piece of land, really comes into the historic record pretty late in the Well, there's a newspaper article talking about the Kenai Peninsula, and it's dated 1876, and it was published in the San Francisco Chronicle, and it actually mentions the area in and around Portlock on the Kenai Peninsula, and it talks about a race of cannibal giants that came down out of the mountains and raided the native villages there, and it would gather human beings up and hold them up by the feet in the air, and then bang their heads on rocks,
right.
like they were killing a fish, and then they would eat. They would eat the.
And okay, think about this. People will say that one of the most terrifying films that they have seen was The Exorcist. Now, if you ask a typical person about what the film talks about or what it's about, they're going to tell you, well, it's about a little girl named Reagan who's possessed by Satan. Simple as that. But that's not entirely true. Satan was not even the star of the show. The source of the little girl's problems was a demon that first shows up on a Ouija board called Captain Howdy. And later, we see that the demon inside little Reagan is this Mesopotamian demon of pestilence known as Pazuzu. And this demon was from the Middle East. A demon that many people were dumbfounded over, which added to the terror of a demonic being that is not familiar to the average Christian, and whether or not a Mesopotamian demon of winds and pestilence would be excised from a person by prayer alone. I felt the same way. A while ago, I did a show about the movie Hereditary. I felt the same way about that because there was this cult that was featured that worshipped a demon called King Paimon. And he's a lesser-known demon to Christians, but he's well-known to occultists because he's one of the 72 demons that were spoken of by King Solomon. And the fact that most regular churchgoers only really know about one devil, the possibilities for many others are, well, that's pretty frightening. It's frightening beyond comprehension. What is most unnerving about this TV show, this Archive 81, is that, like I said, I just finished... I think it was last night. It was last night early. Well, early in the day I finished it, which of course was. I mean, I watched late at night, February 8th. Early in the morning, February 8th. I watched the 6th, and then the 7th episode I watched during the day on February 8th. So I finished it yesterday. Finished the whole series. And in one of the scenes of the show, there's this scene where there's this grimoire, this book about demons. And it's used to identify this other demon that's in the TV show called Caligo. But the page opens to a very real demon named Buer. B-U-E-R, Buer. Buer's appearance in the book gave me chills because I just happened to be reading about a sighting of what could be called a Buer demon that happened on February 8th, 1855. And I've talked about... this sighting, this demon before. It's called the Demon of Devon. You've heard of the Demon of Devon, right? Back in the winter of 1855, February 8th, 1855, there was a light snowfall over Devon, England, and it was reported that hoof-like marks, little hoof-like marks, were appearing in the snow. The footprints were about 2.5 inches wide. They were 8 inches apart, so the footprints were seen throughout the countryside for a total of 100 miles. And even though they would veer off at various points, the greater part of the hoof prints were moving forward in a straight line. Some of these hoof tracks were seen going up walls, they were on rooftops, haystacks. They were leading up to and into various drain pipes, as some say were only 4 inches in diameter. So villagers in the south side of Devon, England reported sightings of a horned devil-like figure walking around, looking into windows. And many townspeople armed themselves and attempted to track down this beast responsible without success. Was it crypto? Was it cryptid of some kind? Was it the demon Buer? Of course, this feline-looking demon with horns that has the legs of a ram or the legs of a goat protruding out of it. It kind of looks like a swastika when you look at it. It's kind of creepy. That's the way this demon was. It's actually drawn in this grimoire of this demon that certainly, if you saw it, it'd be terrifying because that's the idea that the hoof prints of these hoofs of either goats or rams can be seen in all directions because of this creature. They call it the soul stealer. and in some cases it carries bodies behind it. It's kind of a terrifying demon. And it was shown in this TV show, Archive 81. 503-225-0860. That's 503-225-0860. I'm Clyde Lewis. You're listening to Ground Zero, and we'll be back.
Right. So let's look into this. This is the Haunting Memories Nantinek. Sightings, spirits led to desertion of native village. Now this was back in 2009, October 28th, when this was written. My site, whatever that means. It might not mean anything. I'm not promoting the site. By Naomi Clauda, Homer Tribune, Melania, Helen, I guess Cole, and then Wallach's eldest resident is frequently called upon around the village to impart her memories of how life used to be in the southernmost tip of Kenai Peninsula. I guess that's Kenai Peninsula. Among her remembrances are the medicines used to heal the sick, ways of preserving sea lion meat in barrels for winter. She also is one of the last to tell the ghostly story of how the village of Port Chatham, I think you pronounce it right, aimed to be deserted, why the abandoned town was shunned, and those who once lived there vowed never to return. Cal was born January 25, 1934, in Port Chatham. I don't know how you pronounce that. Is it Chatham? Port Chatham? Then a small village founded at the edge of a peaceful moorage. The village once offered shelter for many people, including Captain Nathaniel Portlock's ship on his 1786 Alaska expedition, but when Cole was a baby, the family abruptly moved away from Chatham, leaving the house and every board of its frame behind. What frightening situation caused John and Helen Romanoff to take their children and flee to Nanawalik? They left their houses and school and started all new here. Cole said in a recent interview, speaking in her traditional Sugton through translator Shelley Ash, there was plentiful land here for gardening and people. My parents built a house on the beach. What had frightened Cole's parents hadn't been a single event. Over a long period of time, the Nantinek, or big hairy creature, was reportedly terrorizing villagers. Cole also told of the spirit of a woman dressed in draping black clothes that would come out of the cliffs. Her dress was as long as would drag it. So her dress was as long as she would drag it. Cole said she had a very white face and would disappear back into the cliffs. The goosebumped terror felt when people encountered these spirits was nothing compared to what happened to Cole's godfather. He was working on a boat in 1931 when someone or something hit him over the head with a switch. The blow reportedly killed him instantly. Did I say switch? With a winch. Or how did I get switch? So he hit him over the head with a winch, and the blow reportedly killed him instantly. Cole isn't the only one to tell of strange events in Port Chatham. Port Graham elder Simeon Chaznevoff, or something like that, said he remembers when Natanek was blamed for the disappearance of a gold miner. Of course, this one guy over there had a little place where he was digging for gold. Kaznevnikov said he went up there one time and never came back. No one found any sign of him. What's it make people think that it wasn't a human being that did it? Another story recounted the experience of a sawmill owner named Tom Larson, who had a job cutting wood for the old fish traps. He told of spotting Nantinek on the beach once. After going back to his house to get his gun, he returned to the beach and the thing looked at him. Kazneznikov said for some reason Larson decided against firing a shot. In April 15, 1973, issue of the Anchorage Daily News, a feature article told of the abandoned cannery town of Portlock near Port Chatham. The writer had learned the story during an evening spent with the school teacher and his wife at English Bay, Nanwillick, while on a boat trip. The story is told, quote, Portlock began to exist sometime after the turn of the century as a cannery town. In 1921, a post office was established there, and for a time the residents, mostly natives of Russian Aleut mix, lived in peace with their picturesque mountain and sea setting. End of quote. According to the Daily News story, sometime in the beginning years of World War II, rumors began to seep along the Kenai Peninsula that things were not right in Portlock. Now, this is a very important point when it talks about the beginning of World War II. This is something that they were planning on using as a base. Is this something that, talk about the military now, did the government and the military want them out of that region? These are things to ask. Men from the cannery town would reportedly go up into the hills to hunt Dale sheep and bear and never return. Worst yet, sometimes stories would circulate about mutilated bodies that were swept down into the lagoon, torn and dismembered in a way that bears could not and would not do. Quote, tales were told of the villagers tracking moose over soft ground. They would find giant man-like tracks over 18 inches, there's at 1866, in length, closing upon those of the moose. The signs of a short struggle where the grass had been matted down, only the deep tracks of the man-like animal disappeared towards the high fog-shrouded mountains. End of quote. The article goes on to tell how the fed-up townfolk decided to move en masse, and by 1950 the U.S. Post Office had been closed there. Even into more recent times, Nanticoke reports haven't stopped entirely. A man named Ed, who otherwise prefers to remain anonymous, tells his story online at the strangest eight blogspot.com. Quote, in 1990, while I was working as a paramedic in Anchorage, we got a call out on an alarm for a man having a heart attack at the state jail in Eagle River. He was a native man in his 70s, and after I got him stabilized with IV, CO, and cardiac drugs, my partner and I began to transport him to the native hospital in Anchorage. End quote. En route to the hospital, the paramedic and the native man and Elut from Port Graham talked about hunting. The paramedic had been to Dogfish Bay and was once weathered in there. Quote, the old man sat up on the gurney and grabbed me by the front of my shirt. He got right up in my face and said, did it bother you? Well, with that question, the hair just stood up on the back of my head. I said, yes, did you see it? Was his next question. I said, no, did you see it? He said, no, but my brother seen it. It chased him. In August 1973, Ed and two others were bow hunting for goats and blackies when a storm forced them to take shelter in Dogfish Bay Lagoon. Quote, we beached our shift and we let the tide run her dry. After a dinner of broiled salmon, we turned in to our tent. Back in those days, the best tent I had was a dark green canvas job with a center pole and no windows or floor. We left the fire burning and cleaned the pots and pans so as not to attract bears during the night and turned in, Ed wrote. End quote. The sky was clear, but the wind was howling through the old growth timber that lined the shore. Sometime around 2 a.m., one of Ed's hunting companions, Dennis, woke him after hearing what sounded like footsteps outside the tent. It wasn't a bear. Ed said the walking, or rather creeping, continued after it half-circled the tent. Quote, in August there is still some light in the sky until about 10 or 11. I recall that we all were embarrassed about being afraid about the coming night. We had a flashlight and the rifle in the tent between us. Locked and loaded, I finally dozed off, but woke right up when Dennis squeezed my leg. The illuminated hands of my watch showed it was 2:30. Joe was already sitting up and had the rifle in hand. I heard the first step, not more than about 10 feet from the back of the tent. Slowly, then around and around. Whatever this was, it sounded like it was walking on 2 feet. It made the same semicircle around the tent. When we finally got enough courage to crawl out the tent and turn the flashlight on it, we saw nothing. No tracks, nothing. The third night we decided if it bothered us again, we would come out of the tent shooting. We were actually scared. It never came back the third night, and the following days we had a break in the weather and got the heck out of there, end of quote. Though Sasquatches became something of a popular phenomenon in the 1960s and 70s in the lower 48, Nantinek in Sugden culture has been around for a long time. According to the culture, it might be a different kind of creature, a tragic half-man, half-beast, who wasn't always in this condition. He used to be fully human. What's up, buddy?
For some, Dad, there's rat experts that say like we needed it to rats, but I guess we need to.
Remember when we bought that rate? We were deciding. We said we get one or two, and you decided on one.
Fine.
So you have to be his buddy. My son got a new rat. You get a baby rat for $5. It's cute though. Does anybody want a guinea pig? We gotta get rid of a guinea pig. There's too many animals. I can't take care of them. Elder Nick Tanap said he doesn't discredit the stories about Nantinek, but says he's never seen one. Quote, I think there's something to them, in a quote he said. Cal said that once her family moved to Nanwellick, the Nantineks stayed far away and left them in peace. It didn't foul them, for that they were grateful. She grew up and raised 13 children, of course 13, and remains one of the few Nanwellick residents who can pass on the old traditions. Call a favorite among young people in Nanwellick, especially when she tells stories. Learned many things from her grandfather, who was a traditional healer. Anyways, so there you go. So this is, even back in 2009, they were doing articles about it. The Redoubt Report. The Mouth of Kenai. I guess that's what it is. Okay, it's just reading out of Mark. It's chapter 11 now. And when they came nigh to Jerusalem, unto Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, he, being Jesus, sent forth two of his disciples, and saith unto them, Go your way into the village over against you, and as soon as ye enter into it, ye shall find a colt tied, whereon never man sat. Loose him and bring him. And if any man say unto you, Why do ye this? Say ye that the Lord hath need of him. Straightway he will send him hither. And they went on their way, and they found the colt tied by the door, without in the place where two ways met. And they loosed him. And certain of them that stood there said unto him, What do ye, loosening the colt? And they said unto them, Even as Jesus had commanded, and they let them go. And they brought the colt to Jesus, and cast their garments on him, and he sat upon him. And many spread their garments in the way, and others cut down branches off the trees and strew them in the way. And they that went before, and they that followed, cried, saying, Hosanna, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Blessed be the kingdom of our father David, that cometh in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And Jesus entered into Jerusalem, into the temple, and when he had looked round about upon the things, and now the eventide was come, he went out unto Bethany with the 12. And on the morrow, when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree far off, having leaves, he came, if haply he might find anything thereon. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of the figs was not yet. And Jesus answered and said unto it, No man eat fruit of thee hereafter forever. And his disciples heard it. And they come to Jerusalem, and Jesus went into the temple, and began to cast out them that sold and bought in this temple. So he's doing this again. And overthrew the tables of the money changers, and the seats of them that sold doves. And it would not suffer that any man should carry away any vessel through the temple. And he taught, saying unto them, It is not written, My house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. And the scribes and the chief priests heard it, and sought how they might destroy him. For they feared him, because all the people was astonished at his doctrine. And when even was come, he went out of the city. In the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, calling to remembrance, saith unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursedst, it withers away. And Jesus answering said to them, Have faith in God. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, do as apostles now. When ye pray, my apostles, believe that ye, my apostles, receive them, and ye, my apostles, shall have them. And when ye, my apostle, stand praying, forgive. If ye have sought against any, if ye have aught against any, that your Father also which is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. But if ye do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your trespasses. And they come against to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, there come to him the chief priests and scribes and elders, and say unto him, By what authority doest thou these things? And who gave thee this authority to do these things? And Jesus answered and said unto them, I will ask you of you one question, and answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or of men? Answer me. They reasoned within themselves, saying, If we shall say from heaven, he will say, Why then did ye not believe him? But if we shall say of men, they feared the people, for all the men counted John that he was a prophet indeed. And they answered and said unto Jesus, We cannot tell. And Jesus answering saith unto them, Neither do I tell you by what authority I do these things. And he began to speak unto them in parables. A certain man planted a vineyard, and set a hedge about it, and digged a place for the wine fat, and built a tower, and let it out to the husbandman, and went into a far country. And at the season he sent to his husbandman a servant, that he might receive from the husbandman of the fruit of the vineyard. And they caught him, and beat him, and sent him away empty. Again he sent unto them another servant, and at him they cast stones, and wounded him in the head, and sent him away shamefully handled. And again he sent another, and him they killed, and many others, beating some and killing some. Having yet therefore one son, his well-beloved, he sent him also the last unto them, saying, They will reverence my son. But those husbandmen said among themselves, This is the heir, come let us kill him, and the inheritance shall be ours. And they took him, and killed him, and cast him out of the vineyard. What shall therefore the Lord of the vineyard do? Will he come and destroy their husbandmen, and will give the vineyard unto others? And have ye not read this scripture? The stone which the builders rejected is become the head of the corner. Not the capstone, the head of the corner. This was the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. And they sought to lay hold on him, but feared the people, for they knew that he had spoken the parable against them. And they left him and went their way. And they sent unto him certain of the Pharisees and the Herodians to catch him in his words. And when they were come, they say unto him, Master, we know that thou art true, and carest for no man, for thou regardest not the person of men, but teachest the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? Of course, remember that this is their real king, right? Caesar. They scream out later that we read in John, We have known king but one, Caesar. Shall we or shall we not give? But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said unto them, Why tempt ye me? Bring me a penny, that I may see it. And they sought it, and he said unto them, Whose is this image and subscription? And they said unto him, Caesar's. And he answering said unto them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. Then come unto him the Sadducees, which say there is no resurrection. And they asked him, saying, Master, Moses wrote unto us, If a man's brother die, and leave his wife behind him, and leave no children, that his brother shall take his wife, and raise up seed unto his brother. Now there were 7 brethren. The first took a wife, dying left no seed. The second took her, and died, and neither left any seed. And the third likewise, and the 7 had her, and left no seed. Last of all, the woman died also. Disgusting. And the resurrection, therefore, when they shall rise, whose wife shall she be of them? For the 7 had her to wife. And Jesus answering said unto them, Do ye not therefore err, because ye know not the Scriptures, neither the power of God? For when they shall rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels which are in heaven. As touching the dead, and as touching the dead that they rise, have ye not read in the book of Moses how in the bush God spake unto him, saying, I am your God Abraham, the God Isaac. So let's try this. I am the God of Abraham, and of the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. Ye therefore do greatly err. And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, perceived that he had answered them well, asked him, Which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus answered him, First of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is the one Lord. So the Lord our God is the one Lord. So there's no other lords. There's only one Lord, the Lord God. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. The second is like, namely this: Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Neither is none other commandment greater than these. So we need to first, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. Also, he says that the Lord our God is one Lord. The second, namely, is this is interesting because in the book of Revelation, Jesus is described as Lord God Almighty. And if there's only one Lord, something to think about. And this, of course, then the second one, namely, is this: that thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. And the scribe said unto him, Well, master, thou hast said the truth, for there is one God, and there is none other but he. And to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, with all the soul, and with all the strength, and to love thy neighbor as himself is more than all whole burnt offering and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered discreetly, he said unto him, Thou art not far from the kingdom of God. No man after that durst ask him any question. And Jesus answered and said, while he taught in the temple, How say the scribes that Christ is the son of David? If David himself said by the Holy Ghost, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit thou on my right hand, till I make thine enemies thy footstool. David therefore himself calleth him Lord. And we went over there's only one Lord. Whence then is he then his son? And the common people heard him gladly. And he said unto them in his doctrine, Beware the scribes, which love to go in long clothing, and love salutations in the marketplace, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and the uppermost rooms at feast, which devour widows' houses for a pretense, make long prayers. These shall receive greater damnation. And Jesus sat over against the treasury, and behold, how the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor woman, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto his disciples, and said unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. That's the end of chapter 12 of Mark. So we eclectic recording. We're going to talk a little bit about Bigfoot and demons and the book of Mark. So show a few images that I've taken, and the 4 spirits or demons, whatever the hell they are.